Hey there, night wanderer. Tonight we're stepping through the shadowed corridors of ancient Athens, where justice wasn't served behind modern steel bars, but in stone chambers that would make your worst nightmares seem like a gentle lullaby. Before you settle in for this journey through the harsh realities of Greek detention, take a moment to get comfortable. Maybe adjust your pillow, let your breathing slow, and prepare to explore a world where survival wasn't guaranteed, even for a single day. Now imagine the Mediterranean sun beating down on marble columns, the scent of olive oil and burning incense mixing with something far less pleasant. You're about to discover why ancient Greek prisons weren't places of rehabilitation or reform, but rather grim waiting rooms for death itself. Let's ease into this journey together, where every breath might be your last, and every moment teaches you just how fragile freedom really is. The Desmoterion, you're standing before a low, unremarkable building in the southwest corner of the ancient Athenian agora. The structure doesn't look like much from the outside, just weathered limestone blocks arranged in an unusual pattern. But this isn't a house or a workshop. This is the Desmoterion, Athens' answer to a prison, and if you're here, your time on this earth is likely measured in days, not years. The building itself tells a story of pragmatic brutality. 8 small rooms line a narrow hallway, each barely larger than a modern bathroom stall. These aren't cells designed for long-term residence. They're holding pens for the condemned. The floor plan is deliberately simple, efficient, and utterly without comfort. No windows grace these walls, no gardens provide respite. Just stone, iron, and the constant awareness that this is where hope comes to die. As you're led inside, your feet scrape against the rough stone floor that countless others have walked before you. The walls are stained with moisture, perhaps from the nearby river, perhaps from tears, perhaps from things you'd rather not consider. Each room contains little more than space to lie down, a wooden bucket for waste, and iron rings set into the walls for your fetters. The Athenians weren't interested in making prison comfortable. Why waste resources on the condemned? These rooms served one purpose: to keep you alive and present until society could properly dispose of you. The irony isn't lost on anyone that in a city celebrated for its democracy and philosophy, the last place many citizens saw was this cramped, airless chamber where dignity went to die. And yet, even here, in this monument to judicial finality, traces of humanity persisted. Visitors were allowed without restriction. Family members could bring food, clean clothes, even wine. It was a strange mercy, this freedom to maintain human connection in your final days. Guards didn't interfere with these visits, perhaps understanding that a man facing execution deserved some comfort, or perhaps simply because controlling every interaction would require more effort than it was worth. The smell hits you next. Not just the obvious odors of human confinement, but something deeper. The scent of fear soaked into stone, of desperation that has nowhere to go. It's the smell of waiting, of knowing that every sunrise brings you closer to your last, your fellow. Prisoners might be murderers, thieves, blasphemers, or simply men who ask the wrong questions to the wrong people. Speaking of questions, you might be sharing these quarters with philosophers like Socrates, political dissidents, or foreign spies. The democracy of Athens made no distinction based on fame or wisdom when it came to the Desmoterion. Everyone who entered these walls faced the same fate, lived in the same conditions, and breathed the same stale air, thick with anticipation and dread. At night, when the sounds of the agora fade and the city settles into sleep, the Desmoterion becomes a different kind of theatre. Whispered conversations drift between cells. Some prisoners share stories of their crimes, others protest their innocence. A few, perhaps wise to the ways of Athens, spend their time writing letters or dictating final thoughts to sympathetic visitors. The lucky ones sleep. The rest simply wait, listening to the steady drip of water somewhere in the walls and wondering if tomorrow will bring the hemlock. Now imagine trying to find rest in such a place. Your wrists and ankles chafe against iron fetters that mark you as property of the state. The stone floor offers no cushioning for tired bones. Every sound could be the footsteps of your executioner. Every shadow could hide the face of your fate. This is where you would spend your final nights, in a place designed not for punishment, but for the simple purpose of keeping you available for death. The daily routine of the condemned, mourning in the Desmoterion, doesn't arrive with the gentle sound of roosters or the warm glow of sunshine through the windows. Instead, it seeps in gradually through the building's cracks and crevices, bringing with it the renewed awareness that you're still alive, still waiting, still one day closer to your appointment with Athenian justice. Your day begins with the sound of iron on stone as other prisoners shift in their fetters. The iron rings around your wrists and ankles have become familiar companions now, their weight a constant reminder of your status. These aren't just restraints, they're symbols. In Athens, wearing fetters marked you as someone who had forfeited their freedom, someone whom society had already begun to treat as dead. But here's where Athenian detention becomes surprisingly complex. Despite being shackled like an animal, you retain certain human privileges that would seem bizarre to modern prisoners. Visitors arrive at all hours, sometimes bearing food that puts the standard prison fare to shame. Your family might bring wine, honey cakes, roasted meat, or delicate fruits. The contrast is stark. Your body is chained, but your palate can still taste freedom. The guards, if they can even be called that, are remarkably casual about security. There's no structured surveillance, no regular head counts, no systematic control of your daily activities. This isn't because the Athenians are careless, it's because they fundamentally don't see the point. You're here to await execution, not to serve time. Why invest energy in controlling someone who will soon cease to exist? This casual approach extends to almost every aspect of prison life. You're allowed to leave the Desmoterion for major religious festivals, participating in the very civic celebrations that your crime supposedly threatened. Imagine walking through the streets of Athens, still in fetters, watching free citizens celebrate while you know that these might be the last festivals you'll ever see. It's a peculiar form of mercy mixed with cruelty. Food becomes a central preoccupation, not because you're starving, but because it's one of the few remaining pleasures available to you. The state provides basic sustenance, probably bread, olive, oil and watered wine, but the real meals come from outside. Your loved ones understand that feeding you well is one of the last ways they can show care, one of the final acts of love they can perform before the state claims your life. Conversations with fellow prisoners reveal the strange democracy of condemnation. The man in the next cell might have been sentenced for murdering his neighbor in a fit of rage. Another might be here for stealing sacred objects from a temple. Yet another could be facing death for nothing more than asking uncomfortable questions about the gods, like that philosopher everyone keeps talking about. Death, it seems, is the great equalizer in Athens. During the long afternoon hours, when the Mediterranean heat makes even thinking feel difficult, you might find yourself playing simple games with pebbles or scratching marks into the stone walls. Some prisoners count days, others draw crude pictures of their families, and a few attempt to leave philosophical observations for future condemned men to discover. The walls of the Desmoterion become an accidental gallery of final thoughts and desperate hopes. Exercise is limited to pacing the length of your cell, maybe 5 or 6 steps each direction. The iron around your ankles makes even this simple movement awkward and tiring. Your muscles begin to weaken. Your body starts to prepare for the end, even before your mind accepts it. This physical deterioration becomes another form of psychological pressure, a daily reminder that you're becoming less human, more ready for disposal. Hygiene is whatever you can manage with the resources available. Water for washing comes irregularly, and soap is a luxury few can afford. Your appearance begins to match your status, unkempt, unwashed, increasingly distant from the clean, civilized citizen you once were. The Athenians understand that looking like a condemned man makes the final act of justice easier for everyone involved. But perhaps the most challenging aspect of this daily routine is the waiting itself. Unlike modern prisoners who might serve specific sentences, you have no idea when your final day will arrive. It could be tomorrow, next week, or next month, depending on the court calendar, religious observances, and the bureaucratic needs of Athenian justice. This uncertainty transforms every conversation into a potential farewell, every meal into a possible last supper. Sleep, when it comes, offers the only true escape from this reality. But even dreams become unreliable companions. Some nights you dream of freedom, of walking unshackled through olive groves or sailing across wine-dark seas. Other nights bring visions of the execution methods awaiting you, the taste of hemlock, the sensation of falling from a cliff, or the slow strangulation of the board. Rest becomes another kind of torture when you know it might be your last. The breakfast of the doomed dawn breaks slowly over Athens, and with it comes the first meal of what could very well be your final day on Earth. In the Desmoterian, breakfast isn't about nutrition or pleasure. It's about maintaining just enough life in your body to make your eventual execution legally and socially meaningful. Dead men can't be properly punished after all. Your morning meal arrives in a rough clay bowl that's seen better decades. The contents are simple, almost aggressively plain, barley bread that's gone stale sometime during the previous week, perhaps with a thin gruel of barley porridge that's been watered down to stretch it further. The bread has the texture of weathered stone and about as much flavor. This isn't food, it's fuel designed to keep your body functioning without providing any comfort or satisfaction. But here's where the strange contradictions of Athenian justice become apparent. While the state provides this minimal sustenance, your visitors can supplement it with virtually anything they can afford. So alongside your bowl of gruel, you might find yourself eating delicate honey cakes, roasted figs, fresh cheese, or even imported delicacies that most free Athenians couldn't afford. It's a surreal experience, dining like a nobleman while chained like a slave. The water situation is particularly grim. What you're given to drink has been sitting in clay amphora for unknown lengths of time, developing a murky color and questionable taste. Sometimes it's been mixed with enough wine to make it barely palatable, but mostly it's just stale water that carries hints of the various things that have contaminated it along the way. Drinking it requires a certain suspension of disgust and a practical acceptance that staying hydrated matters more than staying comfortable. The act of eating while wearing fetters becomes its own form of humiliation. The iron rings around your wrists make lifting food to your mouth an awkward, clanking process. Every bite announces your status to anyone within hearing distance. The simple pleasure of eating becomes a public declaration of your condemnation, a constant audio reminder of your fall from citizen to property of the state. Your fellow prisoners gather around shared meals like a grotesque parody of a symposium. Instead of discussing philosophy or politics, conversation turns to more immediate concerns, rumors about execution dates, speculation about which gods might grant mercy, or practical advice about how to die with dignity. the social rituals of dining continue even here, in this place where society has officially given up on you. Some prisoners have lost their appetite entirely, too consumed by fear or despair to maintain interest in food. Others eat with desperate intensity, as if consuming enough pleasure might somehow delay the inevitable. A few approach meals with philosophical detachment, viewing each bite as an exercise in mindfulness, a way to remain present in their final days, rather than becoming lost in dread. The bread itself tells a story of Athenian economics and social hierarchy. The quality varies dramatically depending on your family's wealth and social connections. Poor prisoners get the standard institutional bread, thick and heavy and barely edible. Wealthy prisoners might receive fine white bread made from imported wheat, soft and delicate and absolutely wasted on men who won't live to see another harvest. Olive oil, when it's available, becomes a precious commodity. A few drops can transform that stone-like bread into something approaching edible. But oil is expensive, and not every family can afford to provide it regularly. The presence or absence of olive oil in your meal becomes a social marker even here, distinguishing between condemned men who still have resources and those who face death in poverty, as well as chains. The timing of breakfast carries its own psychological weight. Eating signals the beginning of another day, another 24 hours of waiting for death. Some prisoners refuse morning meals entirely, preferring to remain in the liminal space between sleep and waking rather than fully engaging with another day of existence. Others attack their food with the fury of men who refuse to let approaching death diminish their engagement with life. Surprisingly, the Athenians allow condemned prisoners to observe certain dietary restrictions related to religious festivals or personal beliefs. If you've sworn an oath to avoid certain foods, or if your religious practice requires specific eating habits, these are generally honored. It's another of those strange mercies that make Athenian justice so complex. They'll kill you, but they won't force you to violate your spiritual commitments while you wait. The sharing of food becomes one of the few ways to maintain human connection and dignity. Prisoners who receive extra rations from wealthy families often share with those who have nothing. These acts of generosity create temporary bonds between men who know their time together is limited. Breaking bread together, even this terrible bread, affirms your shared humanity in the face of dehumanizing circumstances. Cleanup after meals is minimal and practical. You rinse your bowl with whatever water is available, trying to remove the worst residue without wasting precious liquid. The bowls themselves bear the marks of countless previous users, stained and chipped and scarred by their service in this grim place. Using them connects you to all the condemned men who came before, a sobering reminder of your place in Athens' long history of judicial death, the sanitation nightmare. If you thought eating in the Desmoterion was challenging, wait until you discover what passes for sanitation in ancient Athens' premier detention facility. The bathroom situation alone might kill you before the state gets its chance, and the overall hygiene conditions would make a modern prison look like a luxury spa. Your personal toilet is a wooden bucket placed in the corner of your cell, shared with whoever else happens to be confined in your particular stone chamber. Privacy is a concept that died the moment you entered this place. The bucket gets emptied when the guards remember to do it, which might be daily, might be weekly, depending on how overwhelmed they are and how much they care about the comfort of dead men walking. The stench from these buckets, especially during Athens' hot summer months, becomes overwhelming. Imagine the concentrated smell of human waste, multiplied by however many prisoners are currently in residence, fermented by Mediterranean heat, and trapped in a building with minimal ventilation. The odor becomes so pervasive that you stop noticing it after a few days, which is perhaps a mercy or perhaps just another sign of how quickly human beings adapt to dehumanizing conditions. Water for personal cleaning is scarce and precious. What little is provided is intended primarily for drinking, leaving washing as a luxury few can afford. Your body begins to accumulate the grime of confinement, dust from the stone floors, sweat from fear and anxiety, and the general filth that comes from living in close quarters with other unwashed humans. Your hair becomes matted, your skin develops a layer of dirt that feels almost protective, and your fingernails collect evidence of your declining circumstances. The iron fetters create their own sanitation challenges. The metal rings around your wrists and ankles trap moisture, dirt, and skin cells, creating perfect breeding grounds for infection and disease. The constant rubbing of iron against flesh creates raw wounds that never have a chance to heal properly. These sores weep, attract flies, and generally add to the catalogue of physical miseries that accompany your wait for execution. Dental hygiene is non-existent. Without access to the twigs or cloths that free Athenians used to clean their teeth, your mouth becomes a breeding ground for decay and disease. Your breath becomes another weapon in the arsenal of unpleasantness that defines prison life. Conversations become exercises in polite distance as everyone tries to minimize their exposure to each other's deteriorating oral health. The Desmoterion lacks any systematic approach to medical care. If you develop illness or infection, your treatment depends entirely on the generosity of visitors or the occasional mercy of guards. Most minor ailments are simply ignored until they either resolve themselves or kill you. Major injuries or diseases might receive attention, but only because a dead prisoner cheats the state of its right to execute you properly. Vermin control is also non-existent. Rats, mice, insects, and other unwelcome creatures share your living space with complete freedom. They're attracted by food scraps, human waste, and the general abundance of organic matter that accumulates in any confined space. Some prisoners develop almost friendly relationships with these creatures, grateful for any living companionship, even from rats. The floors of the Desmoterion are made of stone, which sounds clean until you realize that stone is porous and absorbent. Decades of human occupation have left these floors saturated with every bodily fluid imaginable. The stones have become repositories of human misery, soaking up and slowly releasing the accumulated evidence of fear, sickness, and despair. Laundry is whatever your visitors can manage. The clothes you wear gradually deteriorate under the constant stress of confinement. Fabric tears, seams split, and everything becomes stained with the general filth of prison life. Changing clothes requires someone from outside to bring new garments, making clean clothing another marker of social status and family resources. Sleep hygiene becomes particularly challenging when you're sharing cramped quarters with other prisoners who may be suffering from various illnesses or infections. The close proximity means that any contagious disease spreads rapidly through the population. Coughing, sneezing, and other symptoms of illness echo through the stone chambers, creating a constant soundtrack of declining health. The psychological effects of poor sanitation compound the physical discomfort. Living in filth degrades your sense of human dignity and social connection. You begin to see yourself as the Athenians see you, less than fully human, unworthy of the basic comforts that define civilized life. This degradation serves the purposes of justice by making your eventual execution seem more like the disposal of waste than the killing of a fellow citizen. Personal grooming becomes impossible without outside assistance. Your beard grows wild and unkempt, your hair becomes a tangled mess, and your overall appearance increasingly matches society's image of a condemned criminal. The inability to maintain your appearance serves as another form of dehumanization, slowly transforming you from citizen to thing. Some prisoners attempt to maintain cleanliness through creative improvisation. They use torn pieces of clothing as washcloths, save small amounts of drinking water for washing, or find ways to clean their teeth with splinters of wood or stone. These efforts, while largely futile, represent attempts to preserve dignity and humanity in circumstances designed to strip both away. The contrast between sanitation inside and outside the Desmoterion becomes particularly stark during religious festivals when you're allowed to leave briefly. Stepping into the clean, sweet-smelling streets of Athens provides a shocking reminder of how far you've fallen from normal human standards. The experience of returning to the filth after tasting cleanliness again adds another layer of psychological torment to your imprisonment. Your cellmates and their crimes. Welcome to the social world of ancient Athens' most exclusive club, the Brotherhood of the Condemned. Your cellmates in the Desmoterion represent a fascinating cross-section of Athenian society's failures, fears, and moral boundaries. Unlike modern prisons that separate inmates by crime type or risk level, the Desmoterion throws everyone together in a democracy of death that would be darkly amusing if it weren't so terrifying. The man sleeping on the stone beside you might be Lysander, a merchant who was caught embezzling from the sacred treasury of Athena. His crime wasn't just theft, it was sacrilege, an offense against the gods that demanded death. Lysander spends his days obsessively calculating how much money his family will need to survive his execution, treating his approaching death like just another business transaction requiring careful planning and resource allocation. Across the narrow chamber, you'll find Nikias, whose crime was asking uncomfortable questions about the nature of the gods and their relationship to human morality. Like that famous philosopher everyone whispers about, Nikias challenged conventional wisdom once too often, inspiring young Athenians to think independently about religion and ethics. His execution will serve as a warning to other would-be philosophers about the dangers of intellectual curiosity. Then there's Demetrios, a foreign spy caught gathering information about Athenian military preparations. His case is complicated by questions of citizenship and legal status. As a non-citizen, he lacks certain legal protections, but his connections to powerful foreign allies have kept him alive longer than most. Demetrios speaks little Greek and spends most of his time staring at the walls, perhaps dreaming of the distant homeland he'll never see again. Apollodorus presents a different kind of case entirely. He was convicted of murdering his brother-in-law in a dispute over inheritance rights. The killing was passionate rather than premeditated, but Athenian law makes little distinction between hot-blooded and cold-blooded murder. Apollodorus maintains his innocence, claiming self-defense, but the jury decided otherwise. He oscillates between rage at the injustice and resignation to his fate. The youngest prisoner is Cleomenes, barely past 20, convicted of stealing sacred objects from the temple of Demeter. His youth makes his situation particularly poignant. He committed his crime during a festival, drunk on wine and peer pressure, grabbing some golden offerings on a dare from older friends who managed to escape. Now he faces death for what amounted to a foolish prank, a reminder of how permanent the consequences of temporary stupidity can be. Thrasymachos represents the political crimes that periodically sweep through Athens. He was accused of plotting against the democracy, though the evidence was thin and the accusations politically motivated. His real crime was belonging to the wrong faction during a period of political purges. Thrasymachos understands the game better than most, accepting his fate with the weary resignation of a man who knew the risks of political involvement. The diversity of crimes represented in your small stone chamber reveals the breadth of behaviors that Athenian society considered worthy of death. Religious offenses, political dissent, violent crime, theft of sacred property, and various forms of treason all carry the same ultimate penalty. Athens makes no fine distinctions between different types of capital crimes. Death is death, regardless of the path that led you there. Social class creates interesting dynamics among the condemned. Lysander, despite his financial crimes, still commands respect due to his merchant family's wealth and connections. His visitors bring better food and cleaner clothes, creating a miniature economy within the prison as he shares resources with less fortunate prisoners in exchange for companionship and protection. The conversations that develop between these unlikely roommates often focus on the nature of justice itself. Nikias, the philosopher, engages Apollodoros, the murderer, in discussions about whether killing is ever justified. Thrasymachos analyzes the political implications of their various sentences, while Cleomenes simply asks why the gods allow such suffering if they truly care about human affairs. Language barriers add another layer of complexity to prison social dynamics. Demetrios communicates primarily through gestures and simple words, creating a strange intimacy as other prisoners attempt to bridge cultural and linguistic gaps. These efforts at communication become exercises in basic humanity, reminding everyone that death is a universal language that transcends nationality. The rotation of prisoners creates a constantly shifting social environment. Some men are executed quickly, within days of arriving. Others wait for months as appeals are processed, or religious calendar complications delay their execution dates. This uncertainty means that you never know how long you'll share space with any particular cellmate, adding an element of impermanence to all relationships. Conflicts inevitably arise in such close quarters under such stressful circumstances. Arguments over food, sleeping space, or simple noise levels can escalate quickly among men who have nothing left to lose. However, the shared understanding that everyone faces the same ultimate fate tends to moderate these disputes. Why waste your final days fighting over trivialities when death is the only certainty? Some prisoners form genuine friendships in their final weeks, bonding over shared circumstances and mutual support. These relationships often transcend the social boundaries that would have separated these men in free society. A philosopher and a thief might discover common ground in their approaching mortality, finding comfort in conversation and companionship. The guards occasionally share rumors about release dates or execution schedules, though this information is rarely reliable. These whispered fragments of information create hope and despair in equal measure as prisoners try to calculate how much time they have left and what it might mean for their various appeals or political complications. Religious observances become complicated when prisoners from different backgrounds share cramped quarters. Some maintain daily prayers to their patron gods, while others have abandoned religion entirely in the face of their circumstances. These different approaches to spirituality in extremis create subtle tensions and unexpected alliances among the condemned. The judicial system that condemned you. Understanding how you ended up in this stone chamber requires examining the Athenian judicial system that brought you here, a system that would seem both familiar and utterly alien to modern sensibilities. In Athens, justice isn't dispensed by professional judges or carefully trained legal experts. Instead, it's delivered by your fellow citizens in a process that combines democratic participation with mob psychology in ways that could determine your life or death based on rhetorical skill rather than factual evidence. The process began months ago when someone, perhaps your neighbor, perhaps your enemy, perhaps just someone having a bad day, decided to bring charges against you. In Athens, any citizen can accuse any other citizen of any crime, requiring no special qualifications, training, or evidence beyond their personal conviction that you've done something wrong. This democratic approach to prosecution means that justice often reflects personal vendettas, political calculations, and social prejudices rather than objective legal standards. Your accuser didn't need to prove their case to any authority before bringing charges. They simply needed to appear before the appropriate magistrate, pay a small fee, and swear an oath that they believed you were guilty. The threshold for initiating prosecution is deliberately low, reflecting Athens' commitment to allowing all citizens access to the courts, regardless of their social status or legal expertise. The trial itself was a performance as much as a legal proceeding. Both you and your accuser were given equal time to present your cases to a jury of your peers, hundreds of male citizens chosen by lot from a pool of volunteers. These jurors received no legal training, heard no instructions about evidence or burden of proof, and made their decisions based primarily on which speaker they found more persuasive, more likable, or more deserving of their sympathy. Evidence, as modern legal systems understand it, played a secondary role to emotional appeal and rhetorical skill. Your fate depended largely on your ability to make the jury angry at your opponent and sympathetic to your situation. Witnesses might testify, but their statements carried no more weight than the personal impressions and prejudices of the jurors themselves. The prosecution's job was explicitly to make the jury feel the same anger that motivated the original accusation. Athenian legal theory held that punishment should reflect the emotional response of the community to wrongdoing. If your accuser could successfully transfer their anger to the hundreds of men judging your case, conviction became almost inevitable, regardless of the factual evidence. Your defense relied heavily on character witnesses and appeals to sympathy. You might parade your children before the jury, have friends testify to your good character, or demonstrate your service to the state through military duty or civic participation. The goal wasn't necessarily to prove innocence, but to convince the jury that executing you would serve no useful purpose and might even harm the community. The voting process was simple and final. Each juror received 2 tokens, one for guilty and one for not guilty. They dropped one token into an urn that counted and discarded the other into an urn that was ignored. No deliberation occurred, no discussion of evidence, no attempts to reach consensus. Each man voted according to his individual response to the presentations, and the majority ruled absolutely. If convicted, you faced a second phase of the trial focused on determining your punishment. Both you and your prosecutor proposed penalties, and the jury chose between them. This system encouraged extreme positions. Prosecutors demanded death, while defendants offered minimal fines. The jury's choice between these extremes often reflected their emotional response rather than any systematic approach to proportional punishment. The role of anger in Athenian justice cannot be overstated. The legal system explicitly recognized and channeled personal and community anger into formal punishment. Your conviction wasn't just a determination of legal guilt, it was a community expression of rage that demanded satisfaction through your suffering. Justice and vengeance became indistinguishable in practice. Political considerations inevitably influenced judicial outcomes. If your trial occurred during a period of social tension, military crisis, or political upheaval, the jury's decision might reflect broader community anxieties rather than the specific details of your case. You could be condemned as much for the symbolic value of your punishment as for any actual wrongdoing. The Athenian courts also reflected the democracy's class biases and social prejudices. Wealthy defendants could afford professional speechwriters, impressive character witnesses, and expensive demonstrations of civic virtue. Poor defendants relied on their own rhetorical skills and whatever sympathy they could generate from their circumstances. Justice might be democratically administered, but it wasn't democratically accessible. Legal precedent played virtually no role in Athenian trials. Each case was decided on its own merits without reference to how similar cases had been handled previously. This meant that identical crimes might receive vastly different punishments depending on the specific jury, the quality of the advocates, and the political climate at the time of trial. The speed of Athenian justice was both blessing and curse. Trials were completed in a single day, preventing prolonged uncertainty but also limiting the time available for careful consideration of evidence or argument. Your entire life could be decided in the space of a few hours based on impressions, formed, and arguments heard in real time. Religious and superstitious considerations also influenced judicial decisions. If bad omens appeared during your trial, if sacred festivals interfered with court schedules, or if religious authorities expressed weird opinions about your case, these factors could sway jurors who saw divine intervention in human affairs. Your fate might depend as much on the flight patterns of birds as on the strength of evidence. The finality of Athenian justice was absolute. No appeals process existed, no higher courts could review decisions, and no systematic mechanisms for correcting errors were available. Once the jury reached its verdict and selected your punishment, the legal system was finished with your case. What remained was simply the administrative task of carrying out whatever sentence had been imposed. The food chain of death row life in the Erechtheion operates according to its own brutal economy, where your position in the social hierarchy determines not just what you eat, but how much dignity you can maintain while waiting to die. Food becomes currency, status symbol, and survival tool all at once, creating complex relationships among men who theoretically face the same ultimate fate but experience vastly different journeys toward that common destination. At the top of this grim hierarchy sits Menelaus, a wealthy landowner whose family owns olive groves throughout Attica. His crime, embezzling funds meant for temple repairs, carries a death sentence, but his wealth ensures that his final days unfold with remarkable comfort. Servants arrive daily with elaborate meals packed in fine pottery, roasted lamb with herbs, fresh bread made from imported wheat, aged cheese from his own flocks, and wine that costs more than most prisoners' families see in a year. Menelaus shares his abundance strategically, creating a circle of dependent prisoners who compete for his favor. A slice of his lamb might buy protection from the more violent inmates. A cup of his wine could secure assistance with personal hygiene or help carrying messages to visitors. His generosity isn't altruistic. It's calculated to make his remaining time as pleasant and secure as possible. Below Menelaus in this hierarchy comes Antipater, a merchant whose family retains enough resources to provide decent food, but lacks the extravagant wealth of true aristocracy. His daily provisions include fresh bread, olive oil, dried fish, and occasionally some fruit or vegetables. Antipater must be more careful with his resources, sharing only when it serves clear strategic purposes or when his conscience demands basic human decency. The middle tier of prison society consists of small farmers, craftsmen, and citizens whose families can provide basic supplemental nutrition but little luxury. Their contributions might include coarse bread, watered wine, simple cheese, or whatever vegetables are in season. These prisoners often band together, pooling resources to create communal meals that provide better nutrition and social connection than any individual could achieve alone. At the bottom of this food chain struggle, the poorest prisoners, men, whose families lack resources to supplement state provisions, foreign slaves with no local connections, or citizens whose crimes have alienated them from all social support. These men survive on whatever the state provides: stale barley bread, thin gruel, and water of questionable purity. Their meals are exercises in basic survival rather than any form of pleasure or comfort. The state provisions themselves tell a story of official indifference masked as minimal responsibility. The authorities provide just enough food to keep prisoners alive until execution, but no effort is made to ensure nutrition, flavor, or dignity. Barley bread forms the foundation of every meal, coarse, heavy loaves that require strong teeth and stronger stomachs. The grain is often moldy, the bread frequently stale, and the overall quality suggests that someone is profiting by providing the cheapest possible provisions. Barley gruel appears regularly, a thin porridge that provides calories without much nutritional value or taste. The preparation is haphazard, sometimes too watery to be satisfying, sometimes thick enough to be nearly inedible. Prisoners joke grimly that the gruel's consistency reflects the cook's mood, though whether a good or bad mood produces better. Results remains a matter of debate. Water, the most basic necessity for life, becomes a source of constant anxiety. The municipal supply reaches the desmoterium irregularly, and the storage containers aren't regularly cleaned or maintained. The water often tastes of the clay vessels that hold it, sometimes carries debris from the delivery process, and occasionally shows disturbing colors or odors that suggest contamination. Drinking it requires either desperation or a philosophical acceptance of whatever consequences might follow. Olive oil, precious and expensive throughout the Greek world, appears in prison meals only when provided by wealthy families or generous visitors. A few drops can transform the driest bread into something approaching edible, but oil is too valuable to be wasted on condemned men. Its presence or absence in meals becomes a marker of social status that persists even in these final circumstances. B. Timing of meals reflects the casual attitude of prison administration toward prisoner welfare. Meals arrive when convenient for the guards, not according to any regular schedule designed for prisoner comfort. You might receive your daily bread at dawn one day and mid-afternoon the next, depending on staffing, guard mood, and competing priorities in the agora outside. This irregular scheduling creates additional psychological stress, as hungry prisoners never know when relief might arrive. The uncertainty transforms every meal into a small victory against despair, while missed or delayed meals become cruel reminders of your powerlessness. Time, measured in meals rather than hours, becomes elastic and unpredictable in ways that would drive a free citizen mad. The social dynamics around food distribution reveal the complex hierarchies that develop even among the condemned. Wealthy, prisoners like Menelaus establish themselves as patrons, creating networks of obligation and dependence that mirror the relationships of free society. Their ability to share resources gives them informal power over men who technically face identical fates. Competition for scraps from these wealthy tables can become intense and occasionally violent. Men who were respected citizens just weeks earlier find themselves arguing over crusts of bread or drops of wine, their dignity eroded by the basic animal need for sustenance. These conflicts serve the state's purposes by demonstrating how quickly civilization disappears under pressure. Religious dietary restrictions add another layer of complexity to prison food politics. Jews, followers of various mystery cults, or men under religious vows, may refuse certain foods even while facing starvation. Other prisoners sometimes respect these restrictions, sometimes exploit them as opportunities to claim additional rations. The persistence of religious observance in extremis creates both admiration and resentment. Some prisoners attempt to maintain cooking skills and food preparation rituals even in confinement, using whatever tools they can improvise: broken pottery for cutting, stones for grinding, cloth for straining. They try to transform raw ingredients into something resembling proper meals. These efforts represent attempts to preserve human dignity and cultural identity in dehumanizing circumstances. The seasonality of food supplies affects prison nutrition in ways that free citizens rarely consider. During harvest seasons, families might bring fresh fruits and vegetables to imprisoned relatives. In winter, fresh food becomes scarce and expensive, leaving poorer prisoners dependent on preserved items that grow increasingly unpalatable as months pass. Your execution date relative to agricultural cycles could significantly impact your final quality of life. Trade networks develop among prisoners as they exchange different types of food provided by their families. A man whose relatives raise sheep might trade cheese for olives from another prisoner's family grove. These transactions create temporary alliances and dependencies that shift constantly as the prison population changes through execution and new arrivals. The preparation and sharing of food becomes one of the few remaining opportunities for social ritual and human connection. Prisoners who receive substantial provisions from outside often organize communal meals that temporarily restore some semblance of civilized dining. These gatherings provide psychological relief from the isolation and dehumanization of prison life. The politics of prison. Surviving even a single day in the Desmoterion requires navigating a complex web of alliances, rivalries, and power dynamics that mirror the political life of Athens itself. Except here, the stakes are immediate, and the consequences potentially lethal. Your fellow prisoners may face the same ultimate fate, but their backgrounds, connections, and resources create a microcosmic society where politics can mean the difference between comfort and misery, protection and vulnerability, dignity and degradation. Understanding the prison's political landscape begins with recognizing that death doesn't eliminate social stratification. It simply creates new hierarchies based on different criteria. Wealth still matters, but so do physical strength, rhetorical skill, useful connections, and the ability to forge protective alliances. Your position in this hierarchy determines everything from meal quality to personal safety to the psychological support available during your darkest moments. Menelaus, the wealthy landowner, has established himself as the unofficial patron of the prison's social order. His resources allow him to purchase favors from guards, provide gifts to fellow prisoners, and maintain a network of dependencies that offers him protection and companionship. But his position isn't secure. It depends on continued generosity and careful management of relationships that could shift quickly if circumstances change. Political alignments from the outside world continue to influence relationships within the prison walls. Men who supported opposing factions in recent elections or military campaigns view each other with suspicion, even though their political differences have become meaningless in the face of shared condemnation. These old loyalties create fault lines that can erupt into conflicts over seemingly trivial issues. Thrasymachos, the political prisoner, occupies a unique position in this environment. His experience with Athenian politics gives him insights into human motivation and alliance building that prove valuable even in confinement. Other prisoners seek his advice about managing relationships with guards, interpreting rumors about execution schedules, and navigating the complex social dynamics of shared spaces. Physical intimidation plays a role in prison politics, though less than you might expect. Most prisoners are weakened by poor nutrition, limited exercise, and the psychological stress of approaching death. Additionally, violence that results in injury or death before scheduled execution could complicate legal procedures and bring unwanted attention from authorities. Still, the threat of violence hovers over interactions, particularly when resources or sleeping spaces are disputed. Information becomes a valuable commodity in this environment, where uncertainty dominates every aspect of daily life. Guards occasionally share rumors about court schedules, political developments, or administrative changes that might affect execution timing. Prisoners who maintain good relationships with guards through bribes, personal charm, or family connections can access information that others cannot, creating another dimension of social hierarchy. Religious and philosophical differences also influence prison politics. Nikias, the philosopher, attracts followers among prisoners who find comfort in intellectual discussion and spiritual contemplation. His ideas about death, justice, and human dignity provide psychological sustenance for men grappling with their mortality. However, his influence also creates resentment among prisoners who prefer more practical approaches to survival. The rotation of prisoners through execution creates constant instability in established power structures. Just as alliances solidify and hierarchies stabilize, key figures disappear permanently, forcing everyone to recalibrate relationships and reassess strategic positions. This turnover prevents the development of long-term political institutions while maintaining constant uncertainty about social dynamics. Guards participate in prison politics through their selective enforcement of rules and arbitrary distribution of privileges. A guard who likes you might allow extra visitor time, provide better food, or overlook minor infractions. One who dislikes you could make your final days significantly more uncomfortable through petty harassments and deliberate neglect. Managing these relationships requires diplomatic skills that many prisoners lack. Generational conflicts emerge among prisoners of different ages. Older men often command respect based on their life experience and philosophical acceptance of death. Younger prisoners may resent this deference, feeling that age shouldn't determine hierarchy when everyone faces identical fates. These tensions create ongoing negotiations about leadership, decision-making, and resource allocation. Family connections and social networks from the outside world continue to influence prison relationships. Men whose families know each other may form alliances based on these pre-existing ties. Conversely, prisoners whose families are enemies in the outside world may continue those conflicts within prison walls, creating enduring sources of tension and potential violence. The question of escape creates the most complex political dynamics within the prison. Athens expects condemned prisoners to attempt escape and flee into exile. It's considered almost a civic duty for men facing death. However, escape attempts require cooperation, planning, and shared risks that test every alliance and relationship within the prison. Who can be trusted? Who might betray escape plans for personal advantage? Who has the resources and connections necessary to succeed? Some prisoners actively work to prevent escape attempts, either because they've accepted their fate philosophically or because they fear that failed escapes might result in harsher treatment for everyone. These men become informal allies of the guards, creating another layer of political complexity as prisoners must navigate not just their relationships with authorities, but also their relationships with fellow inmates who might not share their survival goals. Economic relationships also shape prison politics. Wealthy prisoners who share resources create obligations and dependencies that must be carefully managed. Recipients of generosity may feel pressured to provide services, information, or support in return. These economic relationships can strengthen social bonds or create resentment, depending on how skillfully they're handled by all parties involved. Communication with the outside world becomes a source of political power. Prisoners who maintain strong relationships with family and friends can access information about legal developments, political changes, and social events that affect everyone's circumstances. They may also be able to influence outside supporters to assist other prisoners, creating networks of obligation that extend beyond prison walls. The torture before death. Before Athens grants you the mercy of execution, you might first experience the judicial torture that serves as both interrogation technique and punishment in itself. The Athenian legal system recognizes torture as a legitimate tool for extracting confessions, gathering information, and demonstrating the state's power over those who violate its laws. What you're about to endure has been carefully designed to break your will while keeping you alive enough to face proper execution later. The rack stands in a small chamber adjacent to the main prison area, its wooden frame scarred by decades of use and stained with substances you prefer not to identify. This device represents centuries of human ingenuity applied to the problem of inflicting maximum pain while maintaining precise control over the level of suffering. The rack's elegant simplicity masks its terrifying effectiveness, a rectangular frame with rollers at each end designed to stretch the human body beyond its natural limits. Your introduction to the rack begins with the methodical attachment of ropes to your wrists and ankles. The guards work with practiced efficiency, their casual competence suggesting extensive experience with this process. They explain the procedure with almost bureaucratic detachment. Your limbs will be gradually stretched until the pain becomes unbearable, at which point you'll presumably confess to whatever crimes you're accused of committing. The actual process starts slowly, almost gently. The rollers turn gradually, taking up slack in the ropes and beginning to apply tension to your joints. At first, the sensation might be mistaken for a therapeutic stretch, the kind of extension that feels good after a long day of physical labor. This deceptive beginning serves psychological as well as physical purposes, allowing you to hope that perhaps the torture won't be as terrible as anticipated. But the rack's true purpose reveals itself as the tension gradually increases. Your joints begin to separate in ways that evolution never intended, creating sharp shooting pains that travel along your limbs and into your torso. The pain starts in your shoulders and hips, the largest joints bearing the greatest stress, but gradually spreads throughout your body as your entire skeletal system strains against forces it was never designed to withstand. The psychological aspects of rack torture are as carefully designed as the physical components. The gradual increase in pain allows you to anticipate each turn of the rollers, creating dread that amplifies the actual suffering. You can see the guards' hands on the mechanisms, watch their faces for signs of mercy or determination, and count the incremental increases in agony that mark your progress toward confession or unconsciousness. Interrogation proceeds alongside the physical torture, with questions delivered in calm, conversational tones that contrast sharply with your escalating agony. Your torturers want specific information, names of accomplices, details of criminal activities, confessions of guilt, that will simplify legal proceedings. They're not particularly concerned with whether your answers are truthful. They simply want responses that serve the state's administrative needs. The rack's effectiveness lies in its ability to inflict extraordinary pain without immediately causing death. Your torturers can monitor your condition, adjusting the tension to maintain optimal levels of suffering while avoiding permanent damage that would interfere with your eventual execution. This balance requires skill and experience, transforming torture into a specialized craft with its own techniques and professional standards. As the stretching intensifies, your ability to maintain coherent thought deteriorates rapidly. The pain overwhelms normal cognitive functions, reducing your mental capacity to basic survival responses. This mental degradation serves the torture's purpose by making resistance increasingly difficult, while making confession seem like the only possible escape from unbearable suffering. The physical effects of extreme stretching extend beyond immediate pain. Your ligaments begin to tear, creating injuries that will never heal properly, even if you somehow survive both torture and execution. Your breathing becomes labored as the extension of your torso affects lung capacity. Blood circulation changes as stretched limbs receive inadequate supply, causing numbness and tingling that mix strangely with the sharp pain of joint separation. Other torture methods available to Athenian interrogators include various forms of beating, burning, and mutilation designed to extract information while maintaining life. The choice of technique often depends on the nature of your crimes, the information sought, and the personal preferences of your interrogators. Some guards prefer the psychological impact of fire, others the immediate feedback of physical blows. Water torture involves controlled drowning that brings you to the edge of death repeatedly without quite allowing you to escape through unconsciousness. Your head is held underwater until your lungs scream for air, then lifted just long enough to prevent actual drowning. This cycle continues until you provide the requested information, or your interrogators decide that you genuinely don't know what they want to learn. The timing of torture sessions is carefully planned to maximize effectiveness while coordinating with other aspects of your legal proceedings. Torture typically occurs after conviction but before execution, serving to extract any final useful information while demonstrating the thoroughness of Athenian justice. The scheduling also ensures that you're in appropriate condition for your eventual execution, broken but still capable of understanding your fate. Recovery from torture is minimal and mostly focused on keeping you alive until execution rather than relieving your suffering. Guards might provide water if you're becoming dangerously dehydrated, or allow brief rest periods if unconsciousness threatens. But comfort is not the goal. These interventions serve purely practical purposes related to maintaining your availability for punishment. The psychological aftermath of torture often proves more devastating than the physical damage. Even if your body begins to heal, your mind retains vivid memories of helplessness, agony, and the crushing realization that human beings can inflict such suffering deliberately and systematically. This mental trauma serves the state's purposes by ensuring that your final days are dominated by fear and despair, rather than any possibility of dignity or defiance. Some prisoners break completely under torture, providing whatever confessions their interrogators desire, regardless of truth or consequences. Others maintain their innocence despite unbearable pain, either from genuine conviction or stubborn defiance. A few attempt to negotiate, offering partial confessions or alternative information in exchange for reduced suffering. The strange mercy of escape. Here's where Athenian justice reveals one of its most paradoxical aspects. The state that condemns you to death also expects, perhaps even hopes, that you'll escape before your execution can be carried out. This isn't negligence or incompetence. It's a deliberate feature of the system that allows Athens to satisfy both its need for judicial severity and its underlying discomfort with actually killing its own citizens. The Desmoterian security arrangements reflect this ambiguous attitude toward prisoner retention. The building lacks the high walls, guard towers, and systematic surveillance that would characterize a modern maximum security facility. Instead, it resembles a temporary holding area, designed more to establish legal custody than to prevent escape. The guards are few, often distracted, and generally more concerned with administrative duties than with maintaining constant vigilance over prisoners. Your iron fetters, while uncomfortable and degrading, are not particularly effective escape prevention devices. The metal rings around your wrists and ankles are designed more for symbolic purposes than practical security. With proper tools, a file, a chisel, or even sustained effort with rough stone, these restraints can be removed. The guards know this, the prisoners know this, and most importantly, Athenian society knows this. The timing of executions creates additional opportunities for escape. Religious festivals, court holidays, and administrative delays often postpone scheduled executions, sometimes for weeks or months. During these extended waiting periods, prisoners have ample opportunity to plan escapes, gather necessary resources, and coordinate with outside supporters who might assist their flight from Athens. Socrates famously refused to escape despite clear opportunities and encouragement from friends and family. His decision to remain and accept execution was so unusual that it required philosophical justification and became a defining moment in his intellectual legacy. The fact that escape was not only possible but expected makes his choice to stay particularly significant and demonstrates how unusual such compliance actually was. The practical mechanics of escape from the Desmoterion are surprisingly straightforward. The building's location near the Agora provides easy access to busy streets where escapees can disappear into crowds. Multiple exit routes lead to different parts of the city, making pursuit difficult for the limited guard force. The stone construction, while sturdy, includes numerous vulnerabilities that determined prisoners can exploit. Family and friends often assist escape attempts through carefully coordinated plans that exploit the prison's security weaknesses. They might provide tools for removing fetters, create distractions to occupy guards, or arrange transportation and safe houses for escapees. These support networks operate openly because Athenian society generally approves of such assistance, viewing it as natural family loyalty rather than criminal activity. The guards' response to escape attempts is notably restrained. They make required efforts to prevent obvious breakouts and report escapes to appropriate authorities, but they rarely pursue escapees with the determination you might expect. This casual attitude reflects both the practical difficulties of recapture in a city like Athens and the general social acceptance of escape as a legitimate response to capital punishment. Once outside the prison, escaped prisoners face the challenge of fleeing Athens permanently. Exile becomes the practical alternative to execution, requiring escapees to abandon their homes, families, property, and civic identity forever. This harsh consequence means that escape, while possible, carries its own severe punishment that Athens considers roughly equivalent to death in terms of deterrent effect. The geography of Attica provides both opportunities and challenges for escapees. Multiple roads lead to other Greek city-states, allied territories, or neutral regions where Athenian legal authority doesn't extend. However, travel requires resources, contacts, and local knowledge that not all prisoners possess. Successful escape often depends as much on social connections as on physical courage or planning skills. Some city-states actively welcome Athenian exiles, either from political opposition to Athens or simply from humanitarian concern for condemned prisoners. These refugee communities provide escaped prisoners with opportunities to rebuild their lives, though always under the shadow of permanent separation from their homeland. The knowledge that such refuges exist makes escape more attractive and practical. The legal status of escaped prisoners creates interesting complications for Athenian justice. Technically, the original death sentence remains in effect, meaning that escapees can never safely return to Athens. However, after extended periods in exile, some escapees attempt to negotiate returns through political connections, legal appeals, or changed circumstances that might warrant clemency. The psychological aspects of escape present their own challenges. Prisoners must overcome not only physical obstacles, but also emotional attachments to family, property, and civic identity that make permanent exile seem worse than death. Some prisoners prefer the certainty of execution to the uncertainty and permanent displacement that escape requires. Planning escape attempts creates complex social dynamics within the prison, as prisoners decide whether to cooperate, compete, or betray each other's efforts. Successful escapes require secrecy, coordination, and mutual trust among men who have little reason to trust anyone. These collaborative efforts often reveal surprising depths of solidarity among the condemned. The success rate of escape attempts varies depending on factors like prisoner resources, family support, guard vigilance, and political circumstances. During periods of political instability or military crisis, guards may be more distracted and escape opportunities more numerous. Conversely, high-profile cases or public pressure might result in increased security and closer surveillance. The executioner's methods. When escape fails or personal honor demands facing death with dignity, you'll encounter the various methods by which Athens disposes of its condemned citizens. The choice of execution technique depends on your social status, the nature of your crime, and sometimes simply the preferences of those administering your punishment. Each method reflects different aspects of Athenian values regarding death, dignity, and the relationship between citizen and state. Hemlock poisoning represents the most prestigious form of execution, reserved primarily for citizens whose crimes don't involve violence or sacrilege. This method gained fame through Socrates' death, but it was actually quite rare, used only when the condemned could afford the expensive poison and the state wished to maintain some semblance of dignity in the proceedings. The hemlock itself must be imported from distant regions where the plant grows naturally, making it a luxury execution method available only to those with sufficient resources. The preparation of hemlock requires careful attention to dosage and purity. Too little poison prolongs suffering unnecessarily. Too much might cause violent convulsions that disturb the peaceful death that makes this method appealing. The executioner, really more of a specialized pharmacist, must understand both the botanical properties of the plant and the physiological effects of the various alkaloids it contains. Your hemlock execution begins with a formal ceremony that acknowledges your citizenship even as it ends your life. You're allowed to bathe, dress in clean clothes, and receive final visits from family and friends. The poison is prepared fresh, mixed with water or wine to mask its bitter taste, and served in a simple clay cup that emphasizes the ordinary nature of what is about to happen. The effects of hemlock poisoning unfold gradually and relatively peacefully, at least compared to other execution methods. The poison attacks your nervous system systematically, beginning with numbness in your extremities and gradually working toward your vital organs. You remain conscious and capable of conversation for most of the process, allowing for final philosophical discussions or personal farewells. The progression of symptoms follows a predictable pattern that experienced executioners monitor carefully. First comes the tingling in your hands and feet, then gradual loss of sensation and motor control as the paralysis spreads upward through your body. Your mind remains clear, even as your body becomes increasingly unresponsive, creating a strange disconnect between consciousness and physical control. Death finally arrives when the paralysis reaches your diaphragm and other muscles essential for breathing. The process typically takes between 30 minutes and 2 hours, depending on your body weight, the poison's potency, and your individual physiological response. Throughout this time, observers can monitor your condition and provide whatever comfort or conversation you desire. For those who cannot afford hemlock or whose crimes demand more dramatic punishment, Athens employs the board, a form of bloodless crucifixion that combines public humiliation with slow death. You're fastened to a wooden plank with iron collars around your wrists, ankles, and neck, then left exposed to the elements while the restraints gradually tighten to cause strangulation. The board execution serves multiple purposes beyond simply causing death. The public nature of the punishment provides deterrent effect, while the prolonged dying process allows spectators to witness your suffering and consider their own moral choices. The use of iron collars rather than nails emphasizes control and deliberation rather than violent impulse. The positioning on the board is carefully calculated to maximize both discomfort and symbolic impact. Your body is stretched and displayed in a manner that emphasizes vulnerability and powerlessness, while ensuring that death occurs slowly enough to serve educational purposes for observers. The iron collar around your neck provides the mechanism for final strangulation once the preliminary suffering has been judged sufficient. Weather conditions significantly affect board executions, with rain, wind, and temperature extremes adding unpredictable elements to the punishment. Summer executions might involve heat exhaustion and dehydration, while winter procedures could include hypothermia as a contributing factor. These environmental variables make each board execution unique, while adding psychological uncertainty for both condemned prisoners and spectators. The barathron, or origma, represents Athens' most dramatic execution method, being thrown from a high cliff into a deep pit. This technique is reserved for the most serious crimes, treason, sacrilege, or particularly heinous murders that demand spectacular punishment. The symbolism is clear. Such criminals don't deserve ordinary death, but must be literally cast out from human society. The cliff used for Barathron executions is located outside Athens proper, requiring a procession that serves as public spectacle and final opportunity for the condemned to contemplate their fate. The journey to the execution site becomes part of the punishment, allowing time for fear to build while providing opportunities for last-minute confessions or appeals for mercy. The actual throwing requires careful timing and technique to ensure that death occurs from the fall rather than from prolonged suffering in the pit below. Executioners must judge wind conditions, calculate proper trajectory, and coordinate their efforts to achieve quick, clean disposal. Despite its dramatic appearance, Barathron execution requires professional skill and experience. The pit itself serves as a permanent reminder of Athenian justice, gradually filling with the bodies of those who violated society's most fundamental laws. The accumulation of remains creates a physical monument to the consequences of serious crime while providing a practical disposal method that doesn't require ongoing maintenance or expense. Some execution methods vary depending on your citizenship, status, and social standing. Slaves and foreigners might face crucifixion with nails, beating to death with clubs, or other techniques considered too degrading for Athenian citizens. These distinctions reflect the persistent importance of social hierarchy even in death, maintaining civic distinctions right up to the moment of execution. The timing of executions follows religious and administrative calendars that sometimes result in lengthy delays between sentencing and death. Sacred festivals, court holidays, and various bureaucratic requirements can postpone your execution for weeks or months, creating extended periods of anticipation that serve as additional psychological punishment. The final festival, in one of the most surreal aspects of your imprisonment, Athens occasionally allows condemned prisoners to participate in major religious festivals, creating bizarre scenes where men wearing execution fetters join free citizens in celebrating the very civic life they've been judged unworthy to continue sharing. These temporary releases from confinement provide brief tastes of freedom that make returning to the Desmoterion psychologically devastating while serving complex social and religious purposes that reveal the contradictions at the heart of Athenian justice. The Panathenaia, Athens' greatest festival honoring the city's patron goddess, creates the most dramatic opportunities for these temporary freedoms. The celebration requires participation from all levels of society to demonstrate civic unity and religious devotion, and excluding condemned prisoners might anger the gods by suggesting that Athens considers some of its citizens completely beyond redemption. So you find yourself still wearing the iron fetters that mark your condemned status, walking among free citizens as they process through streets you may never see again after today. The preparation for festival participation begins with a grudging acknowledgement from your guards that religious obligations temporarily outweigh security concerns. You're allowed to wash more thoroughly than usual, though the limitations of prison facilities mean that you can never achieve the cleanliness that religious participation ideally requires. Your clothes, if you have access to anything beyond prison rags, are inspected for obvious contamination or offensive odors that might disturb other worshippers. The walk from the Desmoterion to the festival gathering points provides your first exposure to normal city life in weeks or months. The sounds, smells, and visual complexity of Athens in celebration overwhelm senses that have adapted to the sensory deprivation of prison life. Free citizens move with casual confidence that you remember, but can no longer take for granted, their easy interactions highlighting the social isolation that has become your permanent condition. Your fellow festival participants react to your presence with a mixture of discomfort, curiosity, and studied indifference. Some avoid eye contact, perhaps fearing contamination from association with the condemned. Others stare openly, fascinated by the opportunity to observe someone who has crossed the boundary between citizen and non-citizen while remaining technically alive. A few offer small gestures of recognition or sympathy, acknowledging shared humanity despite your different circumstances. The religious ceremonies themselves present complex theological and social questions about your spiritual status. Are condemned prisoners still capable of meaningful religious participation? Do the gods accept offerings from men whom society has rejected? Can prayers for mercy or forgiveness carry weight when spoken by someone already judged beyond redemption? These questions have no clear answers, leaving everyone involved to navigate uncertain spiritual territory. Your participation in ritual activities is necessarily limited by practical and symbolic considerations. You cannot handle sacred objects that require ritual purity, cannot take leadership roles that would compromise the ceremony's integrity, and cannot move freely through crowds where your fetters might cause disruption or alarm. Instead, you occupy a liminal space between participation and exclusion that emphasizes your ambiguous status. The festival foods that you're allowed to share provide stark contrast to prison nutrition and painful reminders of the pleasures you're about to lose forever. Roasted meats from sacrificial animals, fresh bread baked specifically for the celebration, honey cakes shaped into religious symbols, and wine mixed according to traditional formulas create sensory experiences that seem almost impossibly rich after months of institutional gruel and stale bread. Music and dancing at festivals present particular challenges for condemned prisoners whose movement is restricted by fetters and whose emotional state may not align with celebratory requirements. The rhythmic clanking of your chains creates an inadvertent percussion that reminds everyone of your status while making normal dancing impossible. Yet some prisoners find ways to participate through limited movements that honor the music without drawing excessive attention to their limitations. Conversations with free citizens during festivals reveal the psychological distance that separates the condemned from normal society. People struggle to find appropriate topics for discussion with someone who faces imminent death, often settling on awkward small talk that avoids obvious subjects while failing to establish meaningful connection. These interactions highlight how execution transforms social relationships long before actual death occurs. Children's reactions to condemned prisoners at festivals range from innocent curiosity to sophisticated fear based on adult warnings about criminals and punishment. Some approach with questions about your fetters or crimes, while others maintain careful distance that suggests parental coaching about the dangers of association. These encounters provide painful reminders of the normal family life you've lost and will never recover. The return to prison after festival participation creates intense psychological whiplash as you transition from temporary freedom back to permanent confinement. The contrast between celebration and captivity seems almost deliberately cruel, though it probably reflects practical necessity rather than conscious torture. Guards understand this difficulty and sometimes allow brief adjustment periods before reimposing normal prison routines. Religious officials sometimes visit condemned prisoners after festivals to discuss spiritual preparation for death, offering theological perspectives on redemption, divine mercy, and proper conduct in final circumstances. These conversations can provide genuine comfort or additional anxiety, depending on your religious beliefs and the particular priest's approach to discussing death and judgment. The memory of festival participation becomes both treasure and torment during your remaining days in confinement. The experience provides proof that normal life continues beyond prison walls, that the world you're leaving behind retains its beauty and meaning despite your exclusion from it. Yet these same memories make prison life seem more unbearable by comparison, intensifying the suffering that accompanies waiting for death. Some condemned prisoners use festival experiences as opportunities for final messages to family members or friends who might be present in the crowds. Subtle gestures, brief conversations, or symbolic actions can convey information, affection, or forgiveness that might otherwise remain uncommunicated. These final connections serve as important psychological preparation for death, while providing closure for relationships that imprisonment has disrupted. The hemlock hour, your final morning, arrives with the casual brutality that characterizes Athenian justice. No ceremony, no advance warning, just a guard appearing at your cell with the simple announcement that today is the day. The sun hasn't fully risen and the city still sleeps peacefully, unaware that one of its citizens is about to drink his way into history. You've known this moment would come, anticipated it, perhaps even welcomed it, but the reality feels both exactly as expected and utterly surprising. The preparation ritual for hemlock execution reflects Athens' attempt to maintain dignity in the midst of deliberate killing. You're offered the opportunity to bathe, though the facilities remain as primitive as ever: a clay basin, lukewarm water, and a rough cloth that serves as both wash rag and towel. The act of washing takes on profound significance when you know it's the last time you'll ever clean your body, the final opportunity to present yourself as a civilized human being rather than a condemned animal. Clean clothes, if available, complete your preparation for death. Your family may have provided fresh garments for this occasion, understanding that your appearance in these final moments will influence how your death is remembered and discussed. The simple act of dressing becomes a statement about human dignity, a refusal to let the state's power extend completely, degrading your final appearance. The hemlock itself arrives in an unremarkable clay cup, the kind used for everyday drinking throughout Athens. There's something profoundly disturbing about this ordinariness, the way death comes disguised as something as mundane as an evening cup of wine. The poison has been prepared according to traditional formulas mixed with water to mask its natural bitterness, though nothing can completely eliminate the harsh taste that will be among your final sensory experiences. Your executioner, a specialized craftsman in the business of death, explains the process with the detached professionalism of any skilled worker discussing his trade. The poison will begin working within minutes, starting with tingling in your extremities and gradually progressing to complete paralysis. Death will come when the paralysis reaches your breathing muscles, a process that typically takes 1 to 2 hours depending on your body weight and individual constitution. The presence of friends and family during your final hours creates complex emotional dynamics that range from comforting to devastating. Their faces reflect your own range of emotions: fear, sadness, love, regret, and sometimes a surprising peace that comes from accepting the inevitable. Conversations during these final moments tend toward the philosophical or practical rather than emotional, perhaps because strong feelings become too overwhelming when time is so limited. You're encouraged to walk around while the poison takes effect, both to maintain dignity and to help distribute the hemlock evenly through your system. This peculiar exercise routine, pacing back and forth while slowly dying, creates a surreal atmosphere where normal activity continues despite extraordinary circumstances. The contrast between mundane movement and approaching death emphasizes the strange nature of this particular execution method. The first symptoms appear as promised: tingling in your fingers and toes, a strange numbness that spreads gradually up your limbs. Your executioner monitors these changes with professional interest, asking periodic questions about what you're experiencing and noting the progression of symptoms. This clinical attention to detail transforms your death into a medical procedure rather than a violent ending. As the paralysis spreads, you begin to lose control over your movements in ways that are both frightening and oddly peaceful. Your legs become unsteady, requiring assistance to continue walking. Your hands lose the ability to grip objects firmly, yet your mind remains clear throughout this process, allowing you to observe your own dying with remarkable detachment and maintaining the possibility of meaningful conversation until near the very end. The psychological experience of hemlock poisoning involves a strange disconnect between mental awareness and physical capability. You can think clearly, understand what's happening, and communicate effectively, even as your body systematically shuts down. This preservation of consciousness during physical dissolution allows for remarkable final conversations that have influenced philosophy and literature for centuries. Pain is notably absent from the hemlock experience, one reason why this execution method is considered relatively humane despite its ultimate purpose. The poison simply interrupts nerve function without causing the intense suffering associated with other forms of death. This absence of agony allows condemned prisoners to focus on spiritual or philosophical preparation rather than being overwhelmed by physical distress. The presence of observers during hemlock executions serves multiple purposes, providing companionship. For the dying, witnessing the state's justice and learning from the philosophical or spiritual insights that often emerge during final conversations. These witnesses carry responsibility for accurately reporting not just the fact of death, but the manner of dying, creating historical records that influence public understanding of justice and punishment. The final stage arrives when breathing becomes difficult as the paralysis reaches your diaphragm and other respiratory muscles. This is typically the most frightening part of the process, as the approach of suffocation triggers primal survival instincts despite intellectual acceptance of death. Your executioner may offer reassurance about the timing and nature of the final moments, helping maintain calm during these last minutes. Death by hemlock typically occurs quietly, without the dramatic convulsions or violent struggles associated with other execution methods. Observers often report that the condemned simply stopped breathing, sometimes in the middle of a sentence or philosophical observation. This peaceful conclusion serves Athens's desire to maintain some dignity in the process of state-sponsored killing while providing closure for friends and family. The immediate aftermath of hemlock execution involves practical matters that seem almost surreal after the profound experience of watching someone die peacefully. The body must be prepared for burial, personal effects distributed to family members, and official records completed to document that justice has been properly served. These mundane tasks help transition everyone involved from the extraordinary experience of witnessing death back to ordinary life. Your final words, whether profound philosophy or simple farewell, become part of the historical record that shapes how your death is remembered and interpreted. Some condemned prisoners use these final moments for elaborate philosophical statements about justice, mortality, or the nature of existence. Others prefer simple expressions of love for family or forgiveness for enemies. The gifts and materials brought during visits, food, clothing, books, religious items, personal mementos, serve both practical and symbolic purposes as expressions of continued love and connection, despite the official declaration that condemned prisoners are no longer worthy of social membership. These tokens of affection provide comfort while serving as painful reminders of normal life that imprisonment has made inaccessible. The philosophy of prison dreams sleep in the Desmoterion when it finally comes, despite the anxiety, discomfort, and constant awareness of approaching death, provides access to a psychological realm where the normal rules of imprisonment temporarily dissolve. Your dreams become the only space where freedom remains possible, where reunion with loved ones can occur, where alternative outcomes to your current circumstances might unfold. Yet these nocturnal escapes also serve as cruel reminders of everything that waking life has destroyed, creating complex emotional experiences that can provide either solace or additional torment. The content of condemned prisoners' dreams often reflects the intense psychological pressures of awaiting execution, combined with suppressed hopes, fears, and desires that cannot be safely expressed in waking consciousness. Some dreams recreate past happiness with almost painful vividness, allowing you to experience again the simple pleasures of normal life, sharing meals with family, walking freely through Athens, engaging in work that provided both income and satisfaction, participating in religious festivals without fetters marking your condemned status. Recurring nightmares about execution methods create ongoing psychological torture as your sleeping mind rehearses various scenarios of approaching death with creative and terrifying detail. You might dream of drinking hemlock and feeling your body slowly paralyzed, while consciousness remains trapped inside a dying shell. Alternatively, nightmares might feature the bored execution with extended suffering under public scrutiny, or the dramatic terror of being thrown from cliffs into dark pits filled with the bones of previous victims. Some dreams provide escape into impossible futures where legal appeals succeed, political circumstances change, or miraculous interventions allow return to normal life. These wish-fulfillment dreams can provide temporary psychological relief while creating additional pain when consciousness returns to the harsh realities of stone walls and iron fetters. The contrast between dream freedom and waking imprisonment becomes another form of psychological torture that compounds existing stress. Religious and spiritual dreams often intensify during imprisonment as the approach of death focuses attention on questions about divine judgment, afterlife existence, and spiritual preparation for whatever comes next. You might dream of conversations with gods, visions of underworld landscapes, or encounters with deceased relatives who provide guidance about facing death with proper dignity and spiritual preparation. Dreams about family members who cannot visit regularly or who have died previously create complex emotional experiences that combine comfort with loss. Sleeping conversations with your deceased father might provide guidance about facing death courageously, while dreams of children you'll never see grow up generate profound grief mixed with desperate love that has nowhere else to express itself. Some condemned prisoners report prophetic dreams that seem to predict execution dates, execution methods, or other aspects of their fate. Whether these dreams represent genuine supernatural insight or psychological processing of subtle clues observed during waking hours, they create additional anxiety as dreamers struggle to interpret symbolic content that might contain vital information about their approaching fate. Escape dreams provide psychological rehearsal for actual escape attempts while allowing exploration of freedom scenarios that might never be practically possible. These dreams might feature detailed plans for removing fetters, overpowering guards, fleeing Athens, or establishing new lives in distant cities. Sometimes these nocturnal escape scenarios inspire actual escape attempts. Other times they serve purely as psychological relief valves. The sharing of dreams among fellow prisoners creates informal psychological support networks as condemned. Men compare their nocturnal experiences and attempt to interpret symbolic content together. These dream discussions provide opportunities for mutual comfort while revealing the common fears, hopes, and psychological patterns that characterize the experience of awaiting execution. Philosophical dreams, particularly among educated prisoners, often address fundamental questions about justice, mortality, human nature, and the relationship between individual consciousness and larger cosmic order. You might dream of conversations with famous philosophers, participation in intellectual debates about proper responses to unjust treatment, or visionary experiences that provide new insight into life's meaning and purpose. The relationship between dream content and waking emotional state creates feedback loops that can either improve or worsen psychological adaptation to imprisonment. Positive dreams that provide comfort and hope can improve daytime mood and coping ability, while disturbing nightmares can increase anxiety and depression that make imprisonment even more difficult to endure psychologically. Some prisoners attempt to control their dream content through various techniques learned from religious practices, philosophical training, or folk traditions about influencing sleep experiences. These efforts to direct dreaming toward helpful rather than harmful content represent attempts to maintain some psychological agency, even in circumstances where external control has been completely eliminated. Memory dreams that recreate past. Experiences with detailed accuracy provide opportunities to revisit better times while highlighting the contrast between previous happiness and current misery. These dreams might reproduce specific conversations, recreate sensory experiences like particular meals or seasonal celebrations, or allow re-experiencing of personal relationships that imprisonment has destroyed or death will soon make permanently inaccessible. The interpretation of dream symbolism becomes a preoccupation for many condemned prisoners as they search for hidden meanings that might provide guidance about approaching death or insight into divine will concerning their fate. Traditional Greek understanding of dreams as messages from gods adds religious significance to these interpretations, while creating additional anxiety about correctly understanding symbolic content. Social dreams, featuring interactions with guards, fellow prisoners, or other figures from prison life, often process the complex relationships and power dynamics that characterize daily existence in confinement. These dreams might explore scenarios where usual power relationships are reversed, where guards show unexpected mercy, or where fellow prisoners reveal hidden aspects of their personalities or backgrounds. Transformation dreams, where condemned, prisoners imagine themselves changed into animals, spirits, or other forms of existence, might represent psychological attempts to escape human limitations and social categories that have led to condemnation. These dreams can provide temporary liberation from the constraints of human identity, while potentially offering insight into alternative ways of understanding existence and consciousness. The timing of significant dreams often correlates with important external events like family visits, religious festivals, or rumors about execution schedules. This synchronicity between dream content and waking circumstances suggests psychological processes that attempt to integrate new information and emotional experiences through nocturnal mental activity that complements conscious adaptation efforts. Dreams about other condemned prisoners, particularly those who have already been executed, create complex experiences that combine grief, fear, and curiosity about what death actually involves. These encounters with dead fellow prisoners might provide comfort through continued relationship or increase anxiety through disturbing revelations about the experience of dying and whatever existence might follow death. The architecture of despair. Physical design of the Despoterion reflects deliberate choices about how condemned prisoners should be housed, controlled, and psychologically managed during their final weeks or months of life. Every aspect of the building's architecture serves specific purposes related to security, administration, and the systematic dehumanization that transforms citizens into disposable objects awaiting destruction. Understanding these design choices reveals the calculated nature of Athenian justice and the ways that physical space can be weaponized to serve institutional goals. The building's location near the Agora places it at the heart of Athenian civic life while maintaining enough distance to avoid contaminating normal commercial and political activities with the presence of condemned criminals. This positioning serves multiple symbolic purposes, demonstrating that justice operates publicly rather than secretly, while ensuring that the business of death doesn't interfere with the business of life that characterizes healthy civil society. See, external walls of the Desmoterion present an unremarkable facade that doesn't announce its grim purpose to casual observers. This architectural discretion reflects Athenian ambivalence about capital punishment, acknowledging its necessity while avoiding excessive advertisement of state-sponsored killing. The building blends into its urban surroundings rather than standing out as a monument to judicial severity. Interior spaces are designed according to principles of efficiency and control rather than comfort or dignity. The narrow hallway that connects individual cells provides easy supervision while limiting prisoner movement and social interaction. Guards can observe multiple cells simultaneously from strategic positions while maintaining physical distance that reduces their personal involvement with condemned prisoners. Cell dimensions reflect careful calculations about minimum space requirements for human survival balanced against maximum efficiency in building construction and prisoner management. Each chamber provides just enough room for a single person to lie down, sit, stand, and manage basic bodily functions without offering space for comfort, privacy, or any activity that might make imprisonment psychologically bearable. The absence of windows in prisoner cells serves both security and psychological purposes. Windows would provide opportunities for communication with outside accomplices, potential escape routes, and visual connection to normal life that might make confinement more bearable. By eliminating windows, architects ensure that prisoners exist in artificial isolation from natural light, weather changes, and visual reminders of freedom. Ventilation systems in the Desmoterion are minimal, creating poor air quality that adds to prisoner discomfort while serving symbolic purposes about the degraded status of condemned criminals. The stuffy, stale atmosphere makes breathing itself unpleasant while contributing to the overall sensory assault that characterizes every aspect of the imprisonment experience. Stone construction serves practical purposes related to security and durability, while creating a sensory environment that emphasizes hardness, coldness, and permanence. The stone walls absorb and reflect sound in ways that make normal conversation difficult, while amplifying disturbing noises like chains clanking, prisoners moaning, or guards walking. This acoustic environment adds to psychological stress while preventing comfortable social interaction. The floor design prioritizes easy cleaning and maintenance over prisoner comfort, with stone surfaces that provide no cushioning for tired bodies while being simple for guards to wash down when necessary. The lack of any soft surfaces emphasizes the institutional nature of the space while making rest and sleep more difficult and uncomfortable. Drainage systems handle waste disposal with minimal consideration for prisoner dignity or comfort. The building includes basic facilities for removing human waste and washing away various forms of contamination, but these systems prioritize administrative convenience over humanitarian concerns about the conditions in which condemned prisoners must live. Storage areas within the building accommodate the administrative materials necessary for prisoner management: records, restraining devices, execution equipment, and supplies for guards, while providing no space for prisoner belongings or any personal items that might make confinement more psychologically bearable. This allocation of space reflects institutional priorities about what matters in the management of condemned criminals. Security features are surprisingly minimal, reflecting Athenian expectations that condemned prisoners will attempt escape rather than serve their full sentences. The building includes basic measures to prevent unauthorized entry and casual escape, but it lacks the comprehensive security systems that would characterize a facility designed for long-term prisoner retention. The entrance and exit systems allow controlled access for guards, administrators, visitors, and prisoners, while maintaining enough security to prevent unauthorized departures. These systems balance administrative convenience with basic security needs while accommodating the frequent movement of people into and out of the facility for various purposes. Guard facilities within the building provide minimal accommodation for the men assigned to prisoner supervision, reflecting both the temporary nature of guard duty assignments and the low priority given to staff comfort in facility design. Guards work in conditions that are only marginally better than those experienced by prisoners, creating shared hardship that might encourage either solidarity or mutual resentment. Administrative spaces accommodate the record-keeping, scheduling, and coordination activities necessary for managing condemned prisoners and their eventual executions. These areas receive more attention to comfort and functionality than prisoner or guard spaces, reflecting institutional priorities about whose needs matter in the operation of capital punishment systems. The relationship between interior and exterior space emphasizes the separation between normal civic life and the world of condemned criminals. Architectural barriers ensure that activities within the desmotarium remain invisible to casual observers, while preventing prisoners from maintaining visual or social connection to the free community they can no longer participate in. Symbolic. Elements in the building's design reinforce messages about justice, punishment, and the fate of criminals through architectural choices that emphasize strength, permanence, and state authority. Every design decision communicates institutional values while shaping the psychological experience of everyone who enters the building for any purpose. Maintenance requirements for the building reflect its function as a place where people suffer and die, requiring periodic cleaning, repair, and renovation to address the physical damage caused by human misery and institutional violence. These maintenance activities provide ongoing reminders of the building's purpose, while creating opportunities for prisoners to observe normal work activities they can no longer participate in. The integration of execution equipment storage and preparation areas within the building ensures that condemned prisoners remain constantly aware of their approaching fate through proximity to the tools and materials that will end their lives. This architectural choice serves psychological purposes related to maintaining appropriate fear and resignation among the condemned. The social hierarchy of the condemned. Even in death's waiting room, human beings create complex social structures that reflect, modify, and sometimes invert the hierarchies that characterize their previous lives as free citizens. The microcosm of condemned society within the desmotarium reveals fascinating dynamics about how social status adapts to extreme circumstances while demonstrating the persistence of human needs for order, meaning, and community even when official. Society has declared all participants equally unworthy of continued existence. At the apex of prison social hierarchy sits Menelaus, whose extensive family wealth allows him to function as an informal patron within the condemned community. His ability to provide food, comfort items, and various forms of assistance creates networks of obligation and gratitude that mirror the patron-client relationships of free Athenian society. However, his elevated status within prison comes with expectations of generosity and responsibility that create both power and burden. Menelaus navigates his position carefully, understanding that excessive displays of wealth might generate resentment among less fortunate prisoners, while insufficient generosity could result in loss of influence and protection. His social skills, developed through years of managing business relationships and civic obligations, prove valuable in maintaining advantageous position within the artificial community of condemned criminals. The second tier of prison hierarchy includes men like Antipater the merchant and Thrasymachos the political prisoner, whose combination of moderate resources and valuable skills provides them with respect and influence among their fellow condemned. These middle-status prisoners often serve as intermediaries between the wealthy elite and the poor masses, facilitating communication and resource distribution while managing their own survival needs. Intellectual status creates its own form of social currency within prison walls as education, philosophical training, and rhetorical skills provide condemned prisoners with ways to contribute to community life that don't depend entirely on material resources. Nikias the philosopher attracts followers through his ability to provide spiritual comfort and intellectual stimulation, creating social bonds based on shared ideas rather than economic transactions. Religious authority also influences prison. Social dynamics as prisoners who possess theological knowledge or spiritual wisdom gain respect and influence through their ability to address the existential questions that become urgent when death approaches. These religious figures often serve as counselors, confessors, and guides for fellow prisoners, struggling with spiritual preparation for whatever existence might follow execution. Physical strength, while less important than in more violent prison environments, still affects social relationships among condemned prisoners. Men who retain physical capability can assist weaker prisoners with basic tasks while potentially providing protection against the occasional conflicts that arise in close quarters. However, the weakening effects of poor nutrition and psychological stress limit the importance of physical dominance in establishing social hierarchy. Age creates complex social dynamics as older prisoners command respect based on life experience and philosophical acceptance of death, while younger prisoners might possess more physical energy and longer family connections that provide material support. These generational differences create opportunities for mutual assistance, as different age groups offer different resources to the condemned community. Criminal background influences social relationships in surprising ways, with some types of crimes conferring higher status than others within the prison environment. Political prisoners and philosophical dissidents often receive more respect than common thieves or violent criminals, reflecting broader social attitudes about the moral significance of different types of wrongdoing. Family connections and social networks from the outside world continue to influence prison relationships, as condemned prisoners whose relatives know each other maintain these associations within confinement. These pre-existing relationships can provide stability and support, but they can also import external conflicts and obligations into the prison environment, where they create additional complications for social harmony. The duration of imprisonment affects social status as prisoners who have survived longer in confinement develop expertise about prison life, guard behavior, and survival strategies that prove valuable to newcomers. This institutional knowledge creates informal leadership roles based on experience rather than external social position or material resources. Escape planning creates particularly complex social dynamics, as prisoners must balance individual survival needs against group loyalty while managing the security risks associated with collaborative planning. Successful escape attempts require cooperation and trust among men who have little reason to trust anyone, creating temporary alliances that can strengthen or destroy existing social relationships. Information networks within the prison create additional hierarchies based on access to knowledge about execution schedules, guard routines, legal developments, and family circumstances that affect individual prisoners. Those who maintain good relationships with guards or receive frequent visitors often find themselves at the center of informal intelligence systems that provide both social connection and practical advantage. Leadership roles within the condemned community emerge organically based on combinations of resources, skills, personality, and circumstances rather than formal appointment or democratic selection. These leaders often serve as mediators in disputes, coordinators of group activities, and spokespersons in negotiations with guards or administrators. The management of scarce resources creates ongoing social tensions as prisoners navigate between individual survival needs and community obligations. Those with resources face pressure to share while risking depletion of their own supplies, while those without resources must balance requests for assistance against dignity and self-respect considerations. Newcomer integration represents a constant challenge for prison social systems, as the regular arrival of newly condemned prisoners requires ongoing adaptation of established relationships and hierarchies. Veterans must decide how much energy to invest in relationships with newcomers who might be executed quickly, while new arrivals must rapidly assess and adapt to existing social structures. Conflict resolution within the condemned community relies primarily on informal negotiation and social pressure rather than formal authority structures or institutional intervention. Prisoners understand that serious conflicts could result in administrative responses that make everyone's situation worse, creating incentives for peaceful resolution of disputes when possible. Mental health issues affect social dynamics, as the psychological stress of awaiting execution creates various forms of breakdown that other prisoners must manage collectively. Some condemned men develop severe depression, paranoid thinking, or other psychological symptoms that require community support, while potentially creating dangers for everyone involved. The approach of individual execution disrupts established social relationships as condemned prisoners prepare for death while maintaining connections with men they're about to leave permanently. These final preparations create emotional stress for entire communities while requiring ongoing renegotiation of social arrangements as key figures disappear. Cultural and regional differences among condemned prisoners from various parts of Attica or different Greek regions create diversity within the prison community that can either enrich social life through variety or create tensions through misunderstanding and conflicting customs. The politics of memory and legacy. When death becomes inevitable and timing becomes the only remaining uncertainty, thoughts naturally turn toward what will survive after execution, how you'll be remembered, what stories will be told about your life and crimes, and whether any meaning can be extracted from circumstances that seem to demonstrate the ultimate meaninglessness of human existence. These questions about memory and legacy become urgent preoccupations that influence how condemned prisoners spend their final days, while revealing profound truths about human nature and the relationship between individual lives and collective memory. The process of shaping your posthumous reputation begins immediately upon entering the Desmaterion, as every action, word, and attitude becomes potential evidence for future judgments about your character, courage, and moral worth. Fellow prisoners observe how you handle confinement, guards note your behavior during difficult moments, and visitors carry away impressions that will influence family stories told for generations. This constant scrutiny transforms every moment into performance despite the absence of any formal audience. Written communications become particularly important for condemned prisoners who possess literacy skills and access to writing materials through family resources or sympathetic contacts. Letters, philosophical reflections, personal confessions, or political statements created during imprisonment may survive long after execution, providing direct testimony about your thoughts and experiences during final circumstances. These documents carry special authority because they originate from the ultimate extreme of human experience. Your treatment of fellow prisoners creates one of the most significant aspects of legacy formation, as acts of kindness, courage, or wisdom demonstrated in desperate circumstances carry moral weight that actions performed under normal conditions cannot match. Sharing scarce resources with needy cellmates, providing comfort to terrified newcomers, or maintaining dignity under degrading conditions becomes evidence of authentic character that death cannot destroy. Religious and philosophical preparation. For death provides opportunities to demonstrate spiritual maturity and intellectual courage that may influence how religious authorities, philosophical schools, and educated citizens remember your final period. Conversations with visiting priests, discussions with philosophical fellow prisoners, or personal spiritual practices observed by others contribute to posthumous reputation in religious and intellectual communities. The manner of your death itself becomes the climactic evidence for posthumous judgment as observers evaluate your courage, dignity, and spiritual preparation during actual execution. Those who die well according to cultural standards achieve lasting honor that compensates for whatever crimes led to condemnation, while those who die badly may be remembered more for their final cowardice than for any previous accomplishments or virtues. Family involvement in legacy creation provides both opportunities and complications as relatives work to preserve positive memories while managing the social stigma associated with having a condemned criminal among their ancestors. Family stories, memorial practices, and ongoing care for your reputation become part of their own social identity and survival strategy in post-execution circumstances. Political considerations affect legacy formation for prisoners whose crimes involved civic activities or whose executions occur during periods of political instability. Political allies may work to portray you as a martyr for important causes, while enemies may emphasize criminal aspects of your behavior to justify harsh treatment and discredit political positions associated with your case. The documentation of your case in legal records, court transcripts, and administrative files creates official historical evidence that may influence future understanding of your crimes, trial, and execution. These formal documents often survive longer than personal testimonies while carrying institutional authority that shapes scholarly and legal analysis of your case for generations. Artistic and literary representations of your story, whether created during your lifetime or after execution, can significantly influence long-term memory and cultural understanding of your significance. Dramatists, poets, historians, and other cultural figures may find inspiration in your circumstances while adapting your story to serve their own artistic or political purposes. The physical locations associated with your imprisonment and execution may become memorial sites that preserve memory through geographical association. The desmoterium itself, execution sites, family graves, or other places connected to your story can serve as focal points for ongoing remembrance while providing tangible connections between past events and future memory. Social class considerations affect both the likelihood that your story will be remembered and the ways that memory will be shaped and transmitted. Wealthy and prominent prisoners are more likely to be remembered through written records, artistic representations, and formal memorial practices, while poor prisoners may survive only in oral traditions that are more vulnerable to distortion and loss. The broader historical context surrounding your execution influences how future generations interpret your story and assess its significance. Crimes that seem heinous during one historical period may appear more sympathetic during another, while political positions that lead to condemnation may later be vindicated by changed circumstances or evolved understanding. Educational institutions and intellectual communities may preserve your memory through philosophical, legal, or historical analysis that treats your case as instructive example for future students. These academic treatments can ensure long-term survival of your story while potentially distorting personal details to serve pedagogical purposes. Religious communities may commemorate your death through liturgical practices, saint veneration, or theological reflection that emphasizes spiritual aspects of your experience while minimizing political or criminal elements that led to execution. These religious memories often prove remarkably durable while adapting your story to serve ongoing spiritual needs. The cyclical nature of political and social change means that posthumous reputation may fluctuate dramatically over time as different generations reinterpret your story according to their own values, concerns, and historical circumstances. Today's condemned criminal may become tomorrow's martyr, while today's martyr may become tomorrow's cautionary tale about misguided idealism. Your influence on fellow prisoners who survive your execution through escape or changed circumstances provides another avenue for legacy creation as these survivors carry forward stories, lessons, and impressions from shared imprisonment that may affect their own subsequent lives and influence their treatment of future condemned prisoners they encounter. The question of divine judgment adds theological dimensions to legacy considerations, as various religious traditions offer different teachings about posthumous evaluation of earthly actions, the possibility of redemption through proper death preparation, and the relationship between temporal punishment and eternal consequences. Personal artifacts that survive your execution, clothing, writings, artwork, religious items, or simple personal possessions, may serve as physical memorial objects that help preserve memory while providing tangible connections between your earthly existence and ongoing family or community remembrance. The seasons of condemnation, the passage of time in the Desmoterion, takes on unique characteristics as natural seasonal cycles continue outside prison walls, while your own personal season of waiting for death creates its own temporal rhythms that may or may not align with the agricultural and religious calendar that structures normal Athenian life. Understanding how seasonal changes affect imprisonment, execution scheduling, and psychological adaptation provides insight into the complex relationship between natural time and institutional time in the management of capital punishment. Spring. Arrivals at the prison often coincide with renewed energy among both prisoners and guards, as longer days, warmer weather, and the general awakening of natural life create subtle improvements in mood and physical comfort despite the unchanged reality of approaching death. The increased availability of fresh vegetables and fruits during spring months allows families to provide better nutrition for imprisoned relatives, while creating temporary optimism that may or may not be psychologically beneficial. The spring religious calendar includes numerous festivals that may delay execution schedules while providing opportunities for condemned prisoners to participate in community celebrations that connect them temporarily to normal civic life. These religious observances create complex emotional experiences as prisoners appreciate temporary relief from confinement while recognizing that each festival may be their last participation in community religious life. Summer conditions in the Desmoterion become particularly challenging as Mediterranean heat intensifies the discomfort of stone chambers that lack adequate ventilation while increasing the health risks associated with poor sanitation and contaminated water supplies. The heat compounds psychological stress while making sleep more difficult and physical activity more exhausting, creating additional hardships for prisoners already struggling with malnutrition and anxiety. However, summer also brings the longest days of the year, providing more natural light in prison areas that receive any solar illumination while extending the periods available for family visits, guard duties, and various prison activities. The extended daylight can improve mood and energy levels while providing more time for meaningful activities that help pass the endless hours of waiting for death. The summer agricultural calendar affects prison conditions as harvest activities influence the availability and cost of various foods, while determining which family members can visit imprisoned relatives and which must remain home to manage essential farm work. These practical considerations create additional stress for families already struggling with the emotional and economic burdens of having a condemned member. Autumn imprisonment often coincides with the grape harvest and winemaking season, creating opportunities for families to provide better quality wine to imprisoned relatives while generating income that may support improved prison conditions. The symbolic significance of harvest time, reaping what has been sown, adds philosophical dimensions to imprisonment as condemned prisoners contemplate the relationship between their past actions and current circumstances. The autumn religious calendar includes major festivals like the Eleusinian Mysteries that may affect execution schedules while providing final opportunities for spiritual preparation and community participation. These religious observances often focus on themes of death and rebirth that carry special meaning for condemned prisoners approaching their own mortality. Autumn weather provides relief from summer heat, while warning of approaching winter hardships, creating temporal urgency for escape attempts or legal appeals that must be resolved before winter makes travel and outdoor survival more difficult. The changing seasons serve as natural calendars that help prisoners track time while emphasizing the limited duration of their remaining opportunities. Winter conditions create the most severe physical hardships for imprisoned men who lack adequate heating, warm clothing, and protection from cold stone walls that absorb and radiate frigid temperatures. The shortened days reduce natural light while increasing depression and psychological stress that compound existing mental health challenges. However, winter also brings certain practical advantages as the reduced agricultural activity allows more family members to focus on supporting imprisoned relatives, while the suspension of many outdoor civic activities creates more opportunities for legal proceedings, political negotiations, and other activities that might affect individual cases. The winter religious calendar includes festivals that emphasize themes of sacrifice, purification, and preparation for renewal that may provide appropriate spiritual frameworks for condemned prisoners preparing for death. These religious observances often involve community fasting, charity, and reflection that can create opportunities for improved treatment or spiritual comfort. Winter escape attempts face severe environmental challenges as cold weather, shorter days, and difficult travel conditions reduce the likelihood of successful flight while increasing the physical risks associated with outdoor survival. However, the same environmental factors that complicate escape attempts also reduce guard vigilance and administrative activity that might provide other opportunities for improved circumstances. The psychological effects of seasonal change create complex emotional experiences for condemned prisoners who must process natural cycles of renewal and decay while facing personal termination of all seasonal experience. Spring hope may feel cruel when death approaches, while winter symbolism may provide appropriate preparation for final endings. Economic aspects of seasonal change affect prison conditions as agricultural cycles influence family income, food availability, and the resources available for supporting imprisoned relatives. Harvest seasons provide opportunities for improved prison nutrition and increased family visits, while lean seasons reduce available support and increase competition for scarce resources. The relationship between execution timing and seasonal considerations reveals administrative priorities and cultural values about appropriate times for state-sponsored killing. Some seasons may be considered more suitable for executions based on religious calendar, practical considerations, or symbolic appropriateness that reflects broader cultural attitudes about death and justice. Seasonal health considerations become particularly important for malnourished and stressed prisoners who are more vulnerable to diseases and environmental challenges that change with weather conditions. Summer heat may cause dehydration and heat exhaustion, while winter cold may result in hypothermia and increase susceptibility to respiratory illnesses. The contrast between natural seasonal renewal and personal seasonal ending creates philosophical and spiritual challenges as condemned prisoners observe the eternal cycles of nature while contemplating their own permanent exclusion from future seasonal experiences. These observations may provide either comfort through connection to larger natural patterns or additional distress through emphasis on personal termination. The final dawn, as our long journey through the shadows of ancient Athenian justice draws toward its close, you find yourself once again in that small stone chamber where we began, perhaps with deeper understanding of what it truly meant to survive or fail to survive in circumstances designed to strip away every trace of human dignity while maintaining the pretense of civilized legal procedure. The walls around you have absorbed countless stories of courage and cowardice, wisdom and despair, human connection and devastating isolation that reveal both the worst and best aspects of human nature under extreme pressure. The Desmoterion, with all its calculated cruelties and unexpected mercies, stands as monument to the complex contradictions that characterize any society's attempt to balance justice with vengeance, order with compassion, collective security with individual rights. Your experience here has demonstrated how quickly the institutions of civilization can transform citizens into disposable objects while revealing the persistent human capacity for dignity, kindness, and meaning-making, even in circumstances designed to eliminate all three. Every aspect of your imprisonment, from the irregular provision of stale bread to the psychological torture of uncertain execution timing, from the dehumanizing weight of iron fetters to the surprising opportunities for escape, has illuminated the gap between official justice and human reality. The physical discomforts you've endured pale beside the systematic assault on identity, relationship, and hope that transforms living citizens into walking preparations for death. Yet throughout this machinery of destruction, threads of genuine humanity have persisted in ways that subvert institutional purposes while affirming something essential about human nature that external circumstances cannot completely destroy. Fellow prisoners sharing scarce resources, guards showing unexpected mercy, families maintaining loyalty despite danger and stigma, religious officials offering spiritual comfort. These human connections prove more durable than the iron and stone designed to contain and control them. The escape routes that Athenian law tacitly encourages reveal deep cultural ambivalence about actually executing fellow citizens, creating systems where justice can be satisfied by official condemnation without requiring society to follow through with systematic killing. This institutional hypocrisy serves practical purposes while highlighting the moral tensions that arise when abstract legal principles encounter concrete human realities. The various execution methods available to Athenian justice, Hemlock's philosophical dignity, the board's public degradation, the Barathron's dramatic finality, each reflect different cultural values about death, dignity, and the relationship between individual and community. Your choice of response to these methods becomes a final statement about personal values and understanding of what makes existence meaningful or meaningless. The broader implications extend far beyond ancient Athens to encompass fundamental questions that every civilization must address. What gives any society the right to kill its members? How should justice respond to wrongdoing? What do our methods of punishment reveal about our deepest values and fears? What constitutes truly humane treatment of those who violate social norms? Perhaps most disturbing is the recognition that survival in such circumstances depends less on guilt or innocence than on accidents of birth, wealth, family connections, and social status that determine treatment long before any consideration of actual wrongdoing. Justice in Athens, as in many societies, serves existing power structures while consuming those who lack the resources to defend themselves effectively. The psychological resilience required to maintain sanity under such pressure reveals both human strength and human fragility in ways that illuminate the full spectrum of possible responses to extreme circumstances. Some prisoners find meaning through philosophy, others through religious faith, still others through simple determination to preserve dignity despite systematic dehumanization. These varied responses demonstrate the diversity of human approaches to suffering while providing models for facing adversity in any historical context. Your fellow prisoners, the philosopher and the thief, the politician and the merchant, the young fool and the elderly veteran, represent the full range of Athenian society compressed into circumstances that reveal essential character traits normally hidden by social convention. Death becomes the great equalizer that strips away pretense while testing authentic moral courage and spiritual preparation. The guards, administrators, and officials who manage this system of institutional killing demonstrate how ordinary people participate in extraordinary cruelty through routine compliance with legal authority and social expectation. Their casual efficiency in managing death reveals how quickly normal moral constraints dissolve when supported by institutional legitimacy and collective approval. The religious and philosophical questions raised by your experience, questions about justice, mortality, human dignity, divine will, and social obligation, continue to resonate across centuries and cultures because they address fundamental aspects of human existence that transcend specific historical circumstances. The intellectual frameworks developed by thinkers who faced similar situations provide tools for understanding not just ancient Athens, but contemporary approaches to punishment, justice, and state power. The seasonal cycles that continue outside prison walls while you await death emphasize both the eternal patterns of natural existence and the finite nature of individual participation in those patterns. This contrast between cosmic permanence and personal temporality provides philosophical context for contemplating mortality while highlighting what it means to be excluded from ongoing life. The complex social hierarchies that develop even among condemned prisoners reveal persistent human needs for order, meaning, and community that survive even official declarations of unworthiness and social rejection. These informal institutions demonstrate human capacity for creating meaning and maintaining dignity under circumstances specifically designed to eliminate both. The economics of prison survival illuminate how material resources affect every aspect of human experience while revealing the moral complexity of situations where basic necessities become luxury items and simple kindness becomes precious currency. These economic relationships expose the persistent importance of social class while creating opportunities for both exploitation and mutual support. As you prepare for sleep in this stone chamber, listening to the distant sounds of a city that has forgotten you exist while planning your death, you understand profound truths about the fragility of citizenship, the arbitrariness of justice, and the courage required to maintain humanity in dehumanizing circumstances. Your survival, whether through escape, execution, or some other resolution, depends on choices that reveal your deepest values about life, death, dignity, and the price of integrity. The ultimate lesson may be that survival isn't simply about staying alive, it's about preserving essential aspects of self that external circumstances cannot destroy. Whether you choose Hemlock's philosophical departure, exile's lonely freedom, or some other response to Athens's judgment, your choice becomes part of humanity's ongoing story about resistance to power, dignity in extremity, and the eternal tension between individual conscience and collective demands. Tonight, as you settle into whatever rest these circumstances allow, remember that your struggle with impossible choices contributes to civilization's long education about justice, power, and human worth. The stone walls surrounding you will eventually crumble, but the questions your experience raises about punishment, mercy, and human dignity remain as urgent today as they were in ancient Athens. Rest well, knowing that your confrontation with these ultimate circumstances adds another chapter to the eternal human story of how ordinary people respond to extraordinary challenges while maintaining whatever humanity they can preserve against overwhelming pressure to surrender it. Your experience, whatever its ultimate resolution, affirms something essential about human nature that no institution can completely destroy and no authority can entirely control. Sweet dreams, and may tomorrow bring whatever outcome allows you. to maintain your essential humanity while facing whatever fate Athens, or any other power, has prepared for those who dare to live as authentic human beings in circumstances designed to reduce them to something less.